The ration line moved the same way it always did, slow, orderly, and without apology. Cadet Roe Harlan stood at the back of it for the fourth time in 8 days. He did not fidget. He did not speak. He simply stood in the line with his tray, the way regulations said he should, and he waited. Around him, cadets from 5 different species shuffled forward. The Drevathi got their portions. The Meccan got theirs. Even the Sulvari, who needed separate temperature preparation, received their trays on time, every time. When Roe reached the front, the Krellian logistics officer looked at his ration card, tapped his terminal twice, and said the same thing he had said every time before. Human allocation still under review. Next, Roe stepped out of the line. He walked back down the corridor. He did not slam anything. That was day 11. Behind him, 39 other human cadets peeled away from the line in groups of 2 and 3, empty-handed, quiet. They had learned not to make noise about it. Noise had not helped. The first time it happened, Cadet Yevastrom, their senior, had filed an official grievance through every proper channel the Academy offered. The grievance had been acknowledged by an automated system and had not moved since. Roe found Yeva waiting in the corridor junction outside the barracks wing. She was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, reading the response on her data pad for what looked like the 10th time. Same answer, he asked. Pending review, she said. She put the pad away. We have maybe 4 days of emergency rations left between us. After that, we have nothing. Roe did the math without saying it out loud. 41 cadets. For days. The portions would be small enough to be almost insulting. Commander Vothrek knows? He asked. He was informed 3 days ago, Yeva said. He has not responded. She said it without anger, which somehow made it worse. They had both understood by now what this was. It was not a mistake that had been missed. It was a mistake that had been seen and left alone to see what the humans would do. The Krellian officer did not look up because he did not need to. The grievance system had not moved because no one had pushed it. Commander Vothrek had not responded because he was watching. They were being waited out. That evening, Rose sat with Cadet Dara Voss and Cadet Bren Ashford in the corner of the barracks common room. Dara had grown up on a farming colony in the outer belt, one of the rough ones, where the soil processors broke twice a season and you ate what you could pull from the ground with your hands. Bren had grown up in a maintenance hub, the kind of place where nothing worked properly and everything still had to function anyway. Roe had grown up in neither place, but he had learned, somewhere along the way, how to look at a problem from all its sides before he opened his mouth. He spread a rough station map on the table between them, not the official cadet map, the maintenance corridor version, which Bren had pulled from the station's public infrastructure logs. The outer agricultural ring, Rose said, pressing his finger to a wide section near the rim of the station's lower quarter. It's adjacent to our wing. Has been the whole time. I didn't pay attention to it because I didn't need to. Decorative plants, Bren said. For the diplomat quarters. Temperature controlled. Well watered. Decorative, Dara said slowly. She leaned forward and looked at the map. Something shifted in her expression, not excitement, exactly. Recognition. The look of someone seeing something familiar in an unfamiliar place. Who decided they were decorative? The station's botanical curator, probably, Bren said. A Sulvari, I think. Dara tapped 3 sections of the ring with her finger. This one here, those leaf structures read as a variant of a starch plant. This one is some kind of seed-heavy flowering species. And this, she tapped the 3rd section. I don't know what that is, but the stem density means it's storing water and sugar. Something eats that. Something's supposed to eat that. Ro looked at her. You're sure? I grew up eating things nobody had named yet, she said. I'm sure. For a moment, none of them said anything. The emergency ration packs were sitting in a sealed box under Yeva's bunk, counted, rationed, already divided into portions that would keep 41 people functional, but not comfortable. For days of that. And then the humans would have to do the one thing Vothrek was waiting for. Ask for help in a way that looked like surrender. Ro rolled the map up slowly. Academy regulations, he said. Any cadet can request educational access to non-restricted station facilities for observation purposes. The agricultural ring isn't restricted, Bren said. No, Ro said. It isn't. He looked at Dara. How long would you need? She thought about it. Genuinely thought, running numbers in her head the way she always did, the way her colony had taught her, not in optimism, but in reality. 5 days, she said. Maybe less. Ro nodded once. He did not smile, because there was nothing to smile about yet. 41 people were going to eat their emergency rations in careful, humiliating portions while he filed a polite access request to look at plants. But they were going to do it. And they were not going to complain while they did. Across the station, in his administrative office, Commander Vothrek reviewed the daily cohort reports. The human cadets had not filed a second grievance. They had not requested a diplomatic meeting. They had not made noise. He found this mildly satisfying. They were adjusting to the reality of their situation. He moved to the next. Nobody noticed them at first. That was the point. The access request Rowe submitted was 2 sentences long, polite, formal, and completely within the limits of what any cadet was allowed to do. The station's botanical curator, a Sulvari named Phoethus, approved it the same morning without much thought. Cadets requested observation access to the agricultural ring sometimes. They usually came once, found it boring, and never returned. The humans came back every day. They moved through the ring in quiet rotations, never more than 6 at a time, never loud, never leaving anything out of place. Phoethus watched them from the upper walkway the first day, expecting the usual, a few cadets pointing at plants, taking notes for some class project. What he saw instead was Cadet Dara Voss crouching beside a wide-leaf starch plant with the focused stillness of someone who was not studying it. She was measuring it. She pressed her thumb and forefinger around a stem and closed her eyes briefly, feeling the density. Then she moved to the next one and did the same. Phoethus found this interesting enough to stay and watch for another hour. Below him, Bren Ashford was at a station terminal near the ring's maintenance panel, cross-referencing the botanical registry with a separate document on his pad. He worked methodically, flagging species, checking soil content readouts, making small marks. He didn't look like a cadet doing an assignment. He looked like a technician doing an inventory. Phoethus had tended the agricultural ring for 6 station years. Nobody had ever inventoried it. Meanwhile, Sub-Commander Orion was having a quietly uncomfortable week. He had filed his own internal notes on the human cohort situation 4 days ago. Not a complaint, just an observation. The ration allocation discrepancy was documented. The human cadets had been going without for nearly 2 weeks. He had expected the usual progression: formal complaint, escalation, diplomatic noise, and an embarrassing correction that made the station look incompetent. It was annoying, but predictable. The humans had not been predictable. They had gone quiet. Not the quiet of people giving up. He had seen that, and it looked different. This was the quiet of people who had decided something and were not ready to tell anyone what it was yet. He reviewed the access logs and found the agricultural ring requests. He pulled up the rotation schedule. 6 cadets, twice a day, rotating through systematically. He sat with that for a while. Then he walked down to the ring himself, stood at the upper walkway, and looked. Dara was teaching 2 other cadets the difference between a stem that was ready and one that wasn't. She wasn't using technical terms. She was using her hands, showing them. Press here. Feel that. This one, yes. This one, not yet. The cadets watched and copied. They were learning fast. Orion realized he was watching a harvest being planned. Back in the barracks, the emergency rations had entered their final days. Yeva distributed each portion herself, in person, so that nobody felt it was impersonal. She did not make speeches about it. She handed each cadet their allocation, met their eyes, and moved to the next person. Cadet Das Nareen sat with his portion in his hands and did not eat it immediately. He was staring at the wall. He was one of the youngest in the cohort, 18, from a mid-rim station where life had been ordinary and the academy had seemed like the biggest opportunity of his existence. He had not expected this. He had expected difficulty, training, exhaustion, but not this specific humiliation, this quiet institutional dismissal. Yeva sat down beside him. Not across from him, beside him. She waited until he looked at her. "I know what you're thinking," she said. He didn't answer. "You're thinking about filing your own complaint, or requesting a transfer, or writing home." She paused. "Don't." "Why not?" he asked. His voice was steady, which cost him something. "Because Ro and Dara are building something," she said. "And when it's ready, you are going to be standing with us when it happens, not watching from somewhere else." He looked at her. "You know what they're doing?" "I know enough," she said. "Eat your ration. Get some sleep. Show up for the agricultural ring rotation tomorrow. He ate. That evening, Dara met with Ro and laid out what she had confirmed. The starch plants were ready in 3 days. The seed varieties could be processed into something dense and filling within 4. The third species, the one she hadn't recognized at first, turned out to be a relative of a root vegetable common on 3 different alien homeworlds, and it was rich in exactly the kind of caloric content that human biology processed well. We'll have surplus, she said. Real surplus. Ro looked at the numbers. More than 41 people can eat. A lot more, she confirmed. He leaned back and looked at the ceiling. He was thinking about something. She could tell. The expression he got when a problem had finished becoming a problem and was starting to become a plan. Then we don't keep it, he said. Dara tilted her head. What do you mean? Ro said nothing for a moment. Then, how much would we need to feed the whole wing? All cohorts. She blinked. Then she pulled her pad back out and started doing the math. Ro waited. He was good at waiting. Across the station, Orion sat at his desk writing a note to himself that he would not show to Vothrek yet. The humans, he wrote, are not running out of time. They are using it. The smell reached the main corridors before anyone understood what it was. It came through the air circulation vents slowly, the way things do when they have time and nowhere urgent to be. At first it was faint, something warm, something changed, something that had been raw and was now different. Then it deepened, richened. It pressed into the Drevithi dormitory wing and made 3 cadets stop their training review mid-sentence. It drifted into the Meccan communal space and caused a long, confused silence. It found the Sulvari quarters and stopped Fethys entirely as he was walking to his evening station. He stood in the corridor with his nostrils flaring, and he thought, that is coming from my ring. He was not angry. He was something far more complicated than angry. It had taken the humans 2 days to build the cooking structure. Bren had done most of the engineering, pulling thermal venting access from the station's secondary heat exchange system, which was approved maintenance infrastructure that any cadet with technical clearance could access for temperature regulation purposes. He had requested that clearance on day 1 of academy enrollment and had never used it until now. He built the hearth in the wide, flat maintenance bay adjacent to the agricultural ring. It was not beautiful. It was functional, stone-weight ballast blocks from the ring's groundwork foundation, stacked into a low, wide form that distributed heat evenly, with a vent channel running directly into the station's air system. The air system, of course, circulated throughout the entire station. Bren had not mentioned that detail to anyone. When Rose saw the finished structure, he stood in front of it for a long moment. It's within regulation? He asked. Fully, Bren said. I checked 4 times. Good. They lit it that same evening. The first fire was small, test heat, learning fire, and the smoke it produced was thin. By the next morning, when the real cooking began, it was not thin anymore. Dara ran the kitchen the way her colony had run its harvest seasons, with task lists, rotating assignments, and absolutely no wasted motion. She had divided the cohort into 3 groups: harvesters, processors, and cooks. Nobody stood around. Nobody doubled up where they weren't needed. Even Das Nareen, who had barely spoken in days, was given a job he could do quietly and alone, checking the starch plants for ripeness. And he did it with a focused attention that seemed to help him more than rest would have. The food that came off the fire was not elegant. It was honest, dense and hot, and built for people who needed to eat, not to impress. The starch plants roasted into something heavy and satisfying. The seed varieties, ground and pressed and heated on flat metal sheets, produced a flatbread that was rough on the outside and soft in the middle. The root vegetable, which Dara had initially been uncertain about, caramelized when held over sustained heat and became something extraordinary, sweet, dense, almost smoky, with a smell that moved through the air like a slow announcement. That was the smell. It was that root vegetable, caramelizing in 40 portions at once, that pushed through the vents and stopped the Drevithi cadets mid-sentence. Fethys arrived at the agricultural ring at the 17th hour. He had not been summoned. He came because the smell had given him no other option. He found the ring half-harvested, clean cuts, careful work, nothing torn or wasted, and the human cadets working in a rotation so practiced it looked like they had been doing it for years. He stood at the entrance for a moment. Dara noticed him first and walked over. "Curator Fethys," she said. I should have told you directly what we were planning. I'm sorry I didn't. He looked at the ring, then at the hearth beyond the bay entrance, then back at her. You know these species, he said. Not a question. Some of them, she said. The ones I didn't know, I researched. He was quiet for a moment. Then he walked past her into the ring and stood beside the nearest starch plant, the one she had pruned back carefully to let the secondary growth take over stronger. He examined the cut. It was clean. Whoever had done it understood the plant well enough to help it, not just take from it. He sat down on the low groundwork border and watched the humans work. He didn't leave for 2 hours. Commander Vothrek received the report from his facility's monitoring system at the 18th hour. Open fire-based preparation activity detected in Maintenance Base 7, adjacent to the outer agricultural ring. Cadet origin, human cohort. Regulation status, compliant. He read that last word twice. He put on his plain administrative coat, not his uniform, and walked to the observation deck above Maintenance Base 7. He looked down through the wide viewport at what was happening below. 41 human cadets. A constructed hearth. Organized, quiet, rotating labor. The smell, even up here, was dense and warm and entirely impossible to dismiss. He had expected them to break, to beg or complain or escalate in some way that would let him document their inability to manage pressure. Instead, they had done this. Orion appeared at his side. Vothrek had not heard him arrive. They stood in silence for a moment, both of them looking down at the smoke rising in thick, slow columns toward the vents. They are not complaining, sir, Orion said quietly. They are cooking. Vothrek said nothing, but he stayed at the viewport for a long time. Yevastrom walked the main cadet corridor alone, without explanation, and knocked on every cohort door herself. She did not send a message through the station's communication system. She did not post a notice. She walked to each dormitory entrance, waited for someone to answer, and said the same thing each time. The human cadets were eating at the 19th hour, in the maintenance bay adjacent to the outer agricultural ring, and anyone who wanted to come was welcome. No conditions. Bring nothing. Just come. Most of the alien cadets stared at her. The Drevithi group, 12 of them, grouped in a tight cluster near their door, looked at each other with a rapid eye flicker that meant they were running the offer through their social logic, checking it for hidden obligation or trap. Yeva waited while they did it. Then the tallest one, their informal speaker, asked why the humans were sharing. Yeva thought about the question for a moment. We made too much, she said. That was not the whole truth, and she suspected the Drevithi knew it. But it was not a lie either, and they seemed to accept it. 2 of them came. The Meccan sent 4. The Sulvari sent Fethus, who had technically not been a cadet for 6 years, but had apparently decided that did not apply to him tonight. The Grawl cohort, 8 large, slow-moving cadets who rarely mixed with anyone, came entirely, all 8 of them, and said nothing on the way in. The smaller species groups sent 1 or 2 each. Ambassador Len Crossfield arrived before most of them. He was a quiet man, middle-aged by human standards, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent his career watching things happen and writing them down very carefully afterward. He had been stationed on Vrethis as a diplomatic observer for 3 months and had, in that time, filed 7 reports that nobody had acted on and attended 11 meetings where he had said very little. He had known about the ration situation since day 4. He had not intervened, because intervention was not his role. His role was to observe. He found Ro near the hearth, overseeing the final preparations. The smell was overwhelming up close, layered and deep, the kind of warmth that reached past the nose and settled somewhere further in. Crossfield stood beside him and watched the cadets work. Was this planned, he asked. Ro considered it. The food was planned. The invitation wasn't, exactly. It just seemed wrong to keep it. Wrong how? Ro was quiet for a moment. He watched Dara direct 2 cadets in the slicing of the root vegetable, steady hands. Even cuts, the motion practiced now from 4 days of repetition. We were hungry, he said. Other people being hungry, too, seemed unnecessary. Crossfield nodded slowly. What would you call this? Officially. Dinner, Rose said. The alien cadets arrived in 1s and 2s and clusters over the next half hour, and they stood at the edges first, the way people do when they are somewhere unfamiliar and have not decided yet whether to commit. The humans ignored the hesitation, not rudely, but the way people ignore rain when they have work to do. They kept moving, kept serving, kept building the portions out. Das Nareen was the first one served. Yeva did it deliberately and in front of everyone. She carried his portion to him herself, while the room was still gathering, and handed it to him directly. He looked at the food and then at her, and something in his face moved in a way that he didn't try to hide. He sat down and ate, and the room watched it happen, and nobody said anything, and somehow that made it matter more than any speech could have. The Grawl cadets sat together in a group and received their portions with the careful gravity their species brought to everything. The first one to try the caramelized root vegetable was still for a long moment after eating it. Then he looked at the cadet beside him and said something in their language, short, low, decisive. The second one tried it. Then all 8 of them were eating in concentrated silence, which among the Grawl, another cadet later explained, was the highest possible form of approval. Fethus ate 3 portions. He said nothing during the meal, but at the end of it he sat for a while and looked at the ring, the careful harvest, the clean cuts, the secondary growth already pushing in where the mature plants had been taken. He had tended this ring for 6 years and never thought of it as food. It had taken humans 11 days without a ration card to see it for exactly what it was. Commander Vothrek came. He was not in uniform. He stood at the far edge of the bay, near the entrance, and nobody stopped him because nobody had said he couldn't come. Nobody welcomed him either. He was simply there, watching. The human cadets moved around the space with the easy confidence of people in their own kitchen, not performing, not posturing, just working. He had expected, when he first allowed the ration situation to persist, that the humans would reveal something about themselves. He had been right about that. He had been entirely wrong about what they would reveal. He stayed until the end of the meal. Nobody asked him if he wanted to eat. 3 days after the feast, a Drevathi cadet named Sorith knocked on the door of the human barracks and asked to speak with whoever was in charge. Yeva answered. She brought him inside. He sat down across from her with the careful posture of someone who had prepared what they wanted to say. "We want to understand what you did," he said. Yeva looked at him. "We cooked food and shared it." "That is what happened," he said. "It is not what we want to understand. We want to understand the decision. You had very little. You were being treated poorly. You could have held what you produced and used it only for yourselves. That would have been rational." Yeva considered him for a moment. "Would it?" Sorith blinked. "By most calculations, yes." "Then your calculation is missing something," she said. She did not say it with hostility. She said it the way Dara said things about plants, as a simple observation from someone who had seen enough to be certain. Sorith left without a full answer, which was still more than he had arrived with. He brought it back to his cohort, and they spent an entire evening discussing it. 2 of them asked to return the next day with more questions. Yeva sent them to Ro, who answered plainly and without drama, and who seemed faintly amused by the whole thing without being unkind about it. The Meccan delegation came the day after that. Then a single Grawl cadet, the largest one, the one who had sat completely still after eating the root vegetable, came alone and sat with Dara in the agricultural ring for an hour. He did not ask many questions. He mostly watched her work and seemed to find the watching itself sufficient. Orion's report landed on the administrative board's shared system on the morning of the 5th day after the feast. He had written it carefully. He was not a careless writer, but this one had taken him longer than usual, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he wanted every sentence to be exactly right. The report documented the timeline. The ration discrepancy beginning on day 1 of the cohort's arrival, the filed grievance on day 3, the lack of administrative response, the 11 days of systematic denial, and the human cohort's response across each phase. He had written the conclusion last. The human cadets, he wrote, were subjected to a documented resource denial that was never formally addressed by this station's administrative command. In response, they identified available station resources within the bounds of their permitted access, developed a production system that generated significant food surplus, and distributed that surplus freely to every cohort on the station that accepted the invitation. They did not violate a single regulation across the entire period. They did not make a second formal complaint. They did not request diplomatic intervention. The outcome of their response has done more to improve interspecies cohort relations on this station than any formal curriculum initiative in the past 11 years. The report was addressed to the administrative board. Vothrek received a copy automatically, as commanding officer. He read it twice in his office, alone, and did not respond. The board called a review session 2 days later. It was framed, officially, as a logistics audit of the station's ration allocation systems. In practice, everyone in the room understood what it was about. The board was made up of 7 senior officers from 5 different species. 3 of them had eaten at the feast, or had colleagues who had. Vothrek was asked to explain the ration discrepancy. He explained it as a processing delay, an administrative backlog that had been incorrectly flagged for review. He used precise language and correct terminology. The board listened politely. Then the senior Solvari board member asked how a processing delay could persist for 11 days without correction despite a formal grievance being filed on day 3. Vothrek's answer was less precise. The session lasted 2 hours. At the end of it, no formal verdict was delivered. None was needed. Vothrek was a careful enough officer to read a room, and what he read in that room was that his explanation had been heard, noted, and found insufficient by everyone present. Ambassador Crossfield filed his own report the same evening. It was shorter than Orion's, 3 paragraphs, precise and devastating, in the measured language of someone who chose each word knowing it would be read slowly by people who understood its weight. He did not use the word negligence. He did not need to. The ration restoration notice appeared in the human cohort's administrative system on the morning of the 8th day after the feast. It was brief and bureaucratic. Allocation processing for human cadet cohort 7 had been resolved. Standard rations to resume immediately. No further action required. No apology. No explanation of the delay. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Rowe read the notice, folded the printed copy, and walked it down to Yeva. She was in the maintenance bay, cleaning the cookware that the cadets had decided to keep. She took the notice, read it, set it on the stone edge of the hearth. "Well," she said. "Well," he agreed. She went back to cleaning. Rowe picked up a second cloth and helped her. Outside, through the agricultural ring, the secondary growth was already coming in thick and strong where the harvest had been taken, the plants healthier now than before, pruned the way Dara had taught everyone, already preparing their next yield. A small fire still burned low in the hearth. The cadets had kept it going, in rotating shifts, since the night of the feast. Nobody had said to keep it. Nobody had said to stop. It just stayed. The official reclassification notice came from the station's botanical board 12 days after the feast, and it was written, in large part, by Phoethus. The outer agricultural ring, the notice stated, was to be redesignated as a multi-species practical resource zone, available for supervised use by all cadet cohorts under the guidance of the Botanical Curator's office. The change was immediate. The language was dry and institutional. But Rowe read it 3 times and understood exactly what it meant. The humans had made something that had not existed before, and the station had decided to keep it. Dara was in the ring when the notice went out. She didn't read it until later. She was busy showing 2 Meccan cadets the correct way to harvest the starch plants without damaging the root system. They were careful students, slow, methodical, asking questions in the specific way their species did, repeating each step back to her before moving forward. She found she didn't mind the pace. Brent spent most of that week in the maintenance bay doing what he always did, improving something. He had rebuilt sections of the hearth with proper alloy framing, reinforcing the stone base, and adding a second vent channel so the heat distributed more evenly. He was also, quietly, drawing up a document on his pad, a maintenance guide for the hearth, with diagrams, so that anyone who needed to use it after the humans left would know how. He hadn't been asked to make it. He made it anyway. Vothrek's reassignment was announced without ceremony on the 14th day. He was being moved to administrative review, a department that sounded important and was not. The language of the announcement was careful and gave no direct reason. It did not need to. Everyone on the station who paid attention to such things understood what administrative review meant for a senior officer with a recent board inquiry on his record. Vothrek understood it too. He cleared his office over 2 days, alone, in the early hours when the corridors were quiet. On his last morning, he passed the agricultural ring on his way to the docking bay. He stopped at the viewport that overlooked the maintenance bay. The hearth was burning, low and steady, a keeper fire, not a cooking fire. 2 human cadets sat near it on groundwork stones, talking quietly. The ring beyond them was green and thick, already showing the new growth that Dara's careful harvesting had encouraged. Vothrek stood there for a moment. He had been so certain that deprivation would reveal the truth about a species. He had expected it to show him smallness, complaint, desperation, fracture. Instead, the humans had shown him what they did with empty hands and enough time. They built kitchens. They fed strangers. He walked to the docking bay without looking back. Das Nareen had changed in ways he couldn't fully explain, even to himself. He was still the youngest in the cohort. He was still sometimes uncertain and still sometimes afraid. But there was something settled in him now that had not been there before the 11 days. Something that had formed slowly, the way heat forms things. During the long rotation shifts and the careful work, in the evening, he had been handed the first plate while everyone watched. He was in the corridor outside the barracks when the Grawl cadet found him. The Grawl was the large one, the one who had gone still after eating the root vegetable. He stopped in front of Das and looked at him with the patient gravity of someone who had prepared what they wanted to ask. "Are humans always like this?" he said. Das thought about the question. He thought about the 11 days, the empty ration line, the emergency portions divided into shares almost too small to matter. He thought about Dara crouching in the agricultural ring at the 5th hour, before anyone else was awake, counting stems. He thought about Bryn building a hearth from ballast stone and thermal venting, because that was what was available. He thought about Yeva sitting beside him when he had almost broken, not to comfort him with soft words, but to tell him plainly that he was needed. "No," he said, "we're like this when it matters." The Grawl cadet considered that for a long moment. Then he nodded once and walked away. The last scene belongs to Ro. He stood at the agricultural ring viewport alone, at the end of a long day, when most of the station was settling into its night cycle. The ring was quiet. Plants breathing in the temperature-controlled air, secondary growth pushing steadily upward in the sections that had been harvested. Dara's work. All of it, her work. The hearth fire burned below in the maintenance bay, low and orange and steady. The smoke it made was thin now, not the thick columns of the feast night, but a constant fine thread that moved through the vent system and spread across the station slowly, the way things do when they are not in a hurry. Ro had checked the ration system that morning. The allocation had come in on time, full and correct. He expected it would continue to come in on time. People tended to remember to fill orders when the alternative was documented in 2 separate diplomatic reports, and the memory of a meal nobody on the station had forgotten. He stayed at the viewport long enough to watch the smoke move and think about how far it traveled. Through all 6 wings. Through the Drevithi dormitories and the Meccan space and the Sulvari quarters. Through every vent on Vrithis station. No words. No announcement. Just the smell of something made by people who were told they had nothing and had decided that was somebody else's problem. It was still there.